The morning after they buried Kwabena Mensah, his family changed the locks on the house his widow had helped him build, and they did it before the dew had dried on the grass. It was a few minutes past 7 on a gray Accra morning in the dry season, and Ama Serwaa Boateng stood on the front step of the East Legon house in the black mourning cloth she had not yet taken off, holding her 6-year-old daughter by the hand, and listened to the new bolt turn over twice on the other side of her own front door. Her husband's elder brother, Nana Yaw Mensah, stood beside the gate in a clean white funeral shirt, a churchman's calm on his face, and told her gently, gently, that was the part she would remember, that the house and the bakery belonged to the family now, that a wife brings nothing and takes nothing, that this was custom, and that she should be grateful they were letting her keep her clothes. A houseboy carried 2 suitcases out and set them on the curb. The gate did not slam. It was closed quietly, the way respectable people close a door, and around Ama's neck, under the black cloth, hung a small carved wooden Sankofa bird on a worn leather cord that her husband had pressed into her hand 4 years before, and not one of them knew what it would come to mean. This is the story of that pendant, of the man who carved it, and of the sealed envelope a gray-haired woman carried up that same drive 11 days later. Ama Serwaa Boateng was 29 years old the week her husband died. She was a Cane, born in a compound house in the Swame district of Kumasi, the second of 4 children of a seamstress and a trotro driver, and she had come to Accra at 22 with 1 box and a certificate from a catering school that had taken her 3 years of evening classes to earn. She had met Kwabena Mensah behind a folding table at a wedding in Danselman, where she was serving jollof, and he was the cousin nobody had introduced, and he had eaten 3 plates, and then asked her, very seriously, who had taught her to balance the pepper like that. They married 18 months later in a small church in Kumasi, with her mother weeping in the front pew, and his mother, Auntie Grace, sitting very straight and saying little. For 7 years they built a life with their own 4 hands. Kwabena had a diploma in business and a job he hated at a freight company, and Ama had a gift, and between them they had a dream the size of a shop front. They started with a single gas oven in a rented kitchen in Medina, Ama baking bread and meat pies before dawn, while Kwabena drove the deliveries before work, and slowly, loaf by loaf, contract by contract, it grew. By the time their daughter was born, they had a real bakery and a small restaurant under one roof on the Spintex Road, with Kwabena's name over the door. Panyan Bakery, after the word for the firstborn, because he was the firstborn son and proud of it. Ama ran the kitchen and the books. Kwabena ran the front and the deliveries. The house in East Legon came 2 years after that, half finished when they bought it, finished room by room with money they counted on the dining table on Sunday nights. They named their daughter Nana Akua. She was 6 the year her father died, a serious child with her mother's steady eyes and her father's habit of asking one question too many, and she did not yet understand that the world had a hard edge. Kwabena Mensah died on a Tuesday, suddenly, of a heart that gave out at 38 while he was loading a van in the cool of the morning. There had been no long illness, no warning, no time to put a single thing in order. Or so it seemed to everyone who stood around the grave. He was the firstborn son of a respected family, a deacon's family from a good Ashanti line, and the funeral was large the way Ashanti funerals are large. Red and black cloth, brass band dirges, a printed brochure with his photograph, 300 people filing past to shake the hands of the bereaved. Ama sat through all of it in the front row with Nana Akua against her side, and she did not wail the way the hired mourners wailed. She sat very still, one hand closed around the small wooden bird at her throat, and she received the condolences of people who would, by the following morning, decide she was no longer family, because the trouble began the moment the last guest had gone home. The Mensah family were not wicked people, and that was what made it unbearable. Nana Yaw Mensah, Kwabena's elder brother, elder by the accident of 2 years, a thing that mattered enormously to him, was 44, an accountant with a firm in Adabraka, and an elder in his church, a man who wore his respectability like a well-pressed shirt. He spoke softly. He quoted scripture. He had carried his brother's coffin on his own shoulder and wept doing it, and he genuinely believed with the whole of his careful heart that what he was about to do to his brother's wife was correct, lawful, and kind. Auntie Grace, the mother, was 66, a tall, dignified woman who had buried a husband and now a son, who sat in the best chair in any room she entered, and who had never once, in 7 years, called Ama by her name without a small pause before it, as though the name were a foreign coin she was deciding whether to accept. And presiding over the family when the family met was Opanyin Kwadwo, a grand uncle in his late 70s, a custodian of custom with a carved linguist staff and a voice like dry leaves, who believed that the old ways had held families together for 400 years and saw no reason to abandon them now for the sake of one young woman from Swam. It was Nana Yaw who came to the house that first gray morning. He came with 2 other relatives and a locksmith, and he was kind about it, and the kindness was a kind of knife. He sat Ama down in her own sitting room before the locks were changed, and he folded his hands, and he told her how it was going to be. Ama, he said, and there was the small pause Auntie Grace always made, only now in her son's mouth. You know we love Kwabena. You know this, and because we loved him, we will look after his child. Akua is a Mensah. She belongs to us. The house, the shop, these are family property now. My brother built them as a Mensah, with the Mensah name over the door, and they returned to the family. This is how it has always been done. He spread his hands as though showing her something self-evident. You are still young. You will marry again. A wife who goes to her husband's house brings her hands and takes her hands. That is all. We are not throwing you away. We are giving you back to your people. Ama heard it through twice before she trusted herself to speak. She closed her hand around the wooden bird and went still for one breath, the way she did before any hard thing. And then she said, very quietly, Kwabena and I built that shop together. I baked the bread. My name is on the lease with his. Nana Yaw smiled the small, patient smile he kept for slow children. A lease can be corrected, he said. And it was. Within a week, the bakery's signboard still said Panyan, but the gate code had changed, and the staff Ama had hired with her own mouth were told politely that Madam was no longer to be admitted to the kitchen, that the family was managing the business now during this difficult time, and that it was better for everyone if she did not make a scene. The girl at the counter, a 19-year-old named Adwoa, whom Ama had trained from the day she could barely slice a loaf, stood at the glass with tears standing in her eyes and her hand pressed flat against the door and could not open it. The houseboy at the East Legon house, a boy named Yusuf, who had eaten Ama's food every day for 2 years, set her suitcases on the curb and would not meet her eyes. None of them were cruel. They were simply afraid and obedient and small. So on the 11th day of her widowhood, Ama Serwaa Boateng was a woman with 2 suitcases, a 6-year-old daughter, a carved wooden bird on a string, and nowhere in Accra to put her head. She did not scream. She did not go to the family compound in Kumasi to beg, though her mother would have taken her in, because she would not carry Nana Akua into a house where there was no room and let the child see her mother eat from another woman's pot. She took a room instead, a single rented room in a compound house in Medina, near the very kitchen where the bakery had begun, with a shared tap in the yard and a paraffin stove and a window that looked onto a wall. She paid 3 months advance from the little she had in her own account, money the family had not been able to touch, and she enrolled Nana Akua in a cheaper school, and she went back to the only thing she had ever truly owned, which was her hands. She bought a second-hand oven on hire purchase and began again. Before dawn, she fried meat pies and baked small loaves in chin-chin and paper bags, and she carried them in 2 large basins balanced, one on her head and one on her hip, to the lorry station and the offices along the Medina Road, and she sold them. 1 cedi, 2 cedis, building back from nothing the way she had built from nothing the first time, only this time alone and grieving and 30. In the evenings, she helped Nana Aqua with her letters by the light of a single bulb, and when the child was asleep, she sat on the edge of the foam mattress and rubbed her thumb over the smooth wood of the little bird until the worn places shone, because it was the last thing of his she had, and because of what he had said the day he gave it to her. He had carved it himself. That was the thing the family never knew. In the lean first year of the bakery, when they had lost a contract and could not make the rent, and Ama had wanted to give up and go home to Kumasi, Kwabena had sat up 2 nights with a kitchen knife and a block of odum wood and carved the Sankofa bird, the bird that turns its head backward to take an egg from its own back, the old Akin sign that means it is not wrong to go back for what you have forgotten, that the past can be returned for and made right. He had hung it around her neck on a leather cord and said, "Sankofa, we go back and we fetch what is ours. Always. Whatever happens, you go back for what is yours." Then he had held the little bird up to the lamp, as if showing it to more than just his wife, and said the thing she would repeat to their daughter years later. Stay with the story to the end, Ama. The part that saves you is almost always the part you cannot see coming. She had thought it was about the contract. She would not understand for a long time that he had meant something larger, and that he had already, quietly, begun to make sure that she could. 3 months into her new life, on a Thursday morning at the lorry station, while Ama was counting coins into the lid of a basin, a gray-haired woman in a Navy lawyer's suit got out of a modest car and stood watching her from the edge of the dusty lot. The woman was Efua Asante, and she was 62 years old, and she had been Kwabena Mensah's lawyer for 11 years. She was a small, upright woman with close-cut gray hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, a senior solicitor with her own small firm in Osu, and a widow herself. She had lost her own husband 9 years before and knew exactly, to the cedi and to the hour, what a careful man's death can do to the woman he leaves and the family that surrounds her. She had a habit, when she was about to say something that mattered, of taking off her glasses and fold them closed with one deliberate click before she spoke, as if she would not let an important sentence pass while anything stood between her eyes and yours. She had been at the funeral. She had watched the family from the 3rd row and said nothing, because 11 days was not yet the time. She had gone to the East Legon house and found the locks changed and Ama gone, and it had taken her the better part of 2 months and a small fee to a fellow she knew at the lorry station to find one widow selling meat pies in a city of 4 million people. Now she crossed the lot, stepping carefully over the gutter, and stopped in front of the basin. "Madame Ama Boateng," she said, "wife of the late Kwabena Mensah?" Ama looked up, a coin still in her fingers. She closed her hand around the wooden bird and went still. "I was his wife," she said. "They tell me I am nothing now." The lawyer studied her for the length of 3 slow breaths, and then she took off her glasses and folded them shut with a single click. "My name is Efua Asante," she said. "I am a lawyer. Your husband was my client for 11 years, and whoever told you that you are nothing told you a lie that the law of this country will not support." She glanced at the basins, the coins, the child's school bag at Ama's feet. "May I buy 2 meat pies and sit with you somewhere we can talk? Because there are some papers, madam, that your husband signed 2 years ago, and I do not think anyone in that family knows they exist." That was the moment everything turned, though Ama did not feel it turn. She felt only confusion and the small, dangerous thing that is hope when you have taught yourself to live without it. She left the basins with Adwoa, for the counter girl had quit the bakery in disgust the week before and now helped Ama in the mornings. And she went with the gray-haired lawyer to a chop bar with plastic chairs, and there, over 2 meat pies and a bottle of malt, Efua Asante began, in pieces, to tell her what Kwabena Mensah had done. She did not tell it all at once. She told it the way a good lawyer tells a thing, a piece at a time, watching the face of the person who has to carry it. "Your husband came to me 2 years ago," she said first, turning the malt bottle a quarter turn on the table. He had just buried his own father, and he had watched what happened to one of his aunties when her husband died. The family came, the property went, and she ended with nothing after 30 years. It frightened him. He said to me, "Madam Efua, I am a firstborn son in a family that believes a wife brings nothing. If I die tomorrow, what happens to Ama and Akua?" She paused and pushed her glasses up her nose. "Do you know what he was asking me?" "No," Ama said. "He was asking me whether custom could be made to lose to law," said Efua Asante. And I told him the truth. I told him that in Ghana, since 1985, when a man dies without a will, the Interstate Succession Law, PNDC Law 111, already gives the bulk of his estate to his wife and his children, not to his brothers, no matter what the elders say at the family meeting. But I told him also that custom is strong and that families ignore that law every single day, and that the surest way, the only certain way to protect a wife and a child is not to die without a will at all. It is to write one, a proper one, witnessed, lodged, beyond argument. She let that sit. She watched Ama's hand close around the little wooden bird. "And so," she said, "he wrote one." The first piece was the will itself. 2 years before he died, in Efua Asante's office in Osu, Kwabena Mensah had executed a will under the Wills Act of 1971. Act 360, the lawyer said, as though the number itself were a kind of shield, signed by his own hand at the foot of every page and witnessed by 2 people who took no benefit under it, Efua's clerk and a notary from down the corridor. In it, he left the East Legon house and Panyan Bakery and everything he owned to his wife Ama Serwaa Boateng and his daughter Nana Kwabena Mensah, in trust with his mother, Auntie Grace, to be cared for from the proceeds for the rest of her life. For he had loved his mother and had not wanted to punish anyone, only to protect his own. He had named Afua Asante his executor, and he had told no one because he knew his family, and he knew that a will spoken of is a will fought over, and a will sealed is a will that wins. I have the original, Afua Asante said, in my firm's safe, where it has been for 2 years, signed, witnessed, dated, and 8 days ago, when I learned how he died, I lodged it with the High Court Registry and I applied for probate. She took off her glasses and folded them shut with a click. Do you understand what probate is, madam? Ama shook her head. The chop bar was loud around them. A radio, a generator, the clatter of a ladle, and she had stopped hearing any of it. Probate, the lawyer said quietly, is the court of this country looking at your husband's will, confirming that it is real and properly made, and giving me, as his executor, the legal authority to carry out his wishes against anyone who stands in the way. Against the family, against the locks they change, against the elders and the custom and Nana Yaw's soft voice. She set the glasses down on the table, lenses up. When the registrar grants it, that paper will be stronger than 300 mourners and 400 years of custom put together. And he will grant it, madam, because your husband did everything right. This was the midpoint of Ama's long year, though she could not have named it so. Everything before it had been the slow arithmetic of survival. The basins, the coins, the single bulb. Everything after it would be the long, patient walk toward a room where the truth would be read aloud. The cruelty of the first morning, the quiet boat turning twice, the suitcases on the curb, the kind knife of Nana Yaw's voice. None of it had been lawful at all. The man they had buried had already, 2 years before, overruled every word of it in writing and locked the proof in a safe in Osu and said nothing and died. The bird at her throat was not a keepsake. It was a promise he had been quietly keeping the whole time. But knowing a thing is true and making a room admit it are 2 different journeys, and the second is longer. The second piece of proof came a week later, and it was the house. Afua Asante took Ama to the Lands Commission Registry off the Cantermints Road, a building of gray filing and slow ceiling fans, and there, with a search fee and 3 days' patience, they pulled the file on the East Legon property. And the file told a story the family did not know. 18 months before he died, a full 6 months after he wrote the will, as though he had lain awake and decided the will alone was not enough, Kwabena Mensah had executed a deed of assignment, registered and stamped, transferring the East Legon house into a family trust, himself and Ama Serwaa Boateng as joint settlers, Ama and Nana Akua as the beneficiaries, Afua Asante as trustee. He had paid the stamp duty. He had registered the instrument. The house had not, in law, been his to leave to his brothers from the day that deed was stamped. It had already passed into a trust for his wife and child, lodged in the records of the state, sealed under a registry number, waiting. He came to me, Afua said, turning the deed face up on the registry counter so the embossed stamp caught the light. And he said, "Madam, the house is where they will go first. Custom or no custom, my brother will want the house. Put it somewhere he cannot reach." She traced the registry number with one finger. So I put it in a trust and I lodged it here in the Lands Commission of the Republic, where it has sat for 18 months under everyone's noses. Nana Yaw changed the locks on a house his brother had already given away. He just did not know it yet. The third piece was the bakery, and it was the cleverest of all because Kwabena had hidden it in plain sight. Panyan Bakery, it turned out, had been a registered limited company for 3 years. Ama had signed the incorporation papers herself one Sunday at the dining table without quite understanding what they were and had forgotten them entirely in the years since. She and Kwabena were the only two shareholders, 51 shares to him and 49 to her, and his 51, under the will, now came to her. The family had been managing a company they did not own a single share of. The signboard said Panyan, the shares said Ama, and the company's small bank account, which Nana Yaw had been quietly drawing on to pay himself a director's allowance for his trouble, had left a trail of statements that Afua Asante photocopied one by one with a thin, grim smile, because a respectable man who helps himself to a company that is not his has, the lawyer said, a particular kind of explaining to do. You did not lose your husband's business, Afua told her in the car outside the registry. You have owned the larger half of it the entire time. They did not steal a thing from a poor widow. They walked into a building and started spending money that, on paper, in the records of this country, has always belonged to you. Ama sat very still in the passenger seat with the photocopies in her lap and the wooden bird in her fist, and for the first time since the boat had turned over twice on her own front door, she let herself cry. Not the loud crying of the funeral, but a slow, silent leaking. The grief and the relief and the 4 months of swallowed rage coming out together. Why did he not tell me? She said at last. Why carry it alone? Because if you had known, you might have felt safe, the old lawyer said, putting on her glasses. And a woman who feels safe lets things slip. He needed you to not know, so that when they came, and he was sure they would come, there would be nothing in your face for them to read. He protected you by leaving you in the dark, madam. It was the last gift of a careful man. Now, she started the car. We let the court do its work, and then we call a family meeting. The grant of probate came through from the High Court 6 weeks later. It was a single page with the court seal and the registrar's signature, naming Afua Asante as the lawful executor of the estate of the late Kwabena Mensah. And it was, as the lawyer had promised, stronger than custom. With it in hand, Afua wrote to the Mensah family a formal letter on her firm's letterhead copied to the head of the family, requesting their presence at a meeting to read and execute the testamentary wishes of the deceased. She did not say what was in it. She let them wonder. And the family, who had spent 4 months telling everyone that the wife had been dealt with according to custom and had gone quietly back to her people, came to that meeting expecting to put their names to whatever papers the lawyer had drawn up, dividing the dead man's property among his brothers. They held it in the family house in Kumasi, in the big room with the family photographs on the wall and the ceiling fan turning slow, because Opanyan Kwadwo had insisted that a Mensah matter be settled on Mensah ground, and Afua Asante had agreed at once because she wanted the witnesses. She wanted the aunties and the cousins and the church elders. She wanted the room full. Nana Yaw sat at the center in a fresh white shirt, Auntie Grace beside him in the best chair, Opanyan Kwadwo at the head with his linguist staff across his knees, and 20 other relatives ranged around the walls on plastic chairs and a borrowed bench. And in through the door, at the appointed hour, came the small gray-haired lawyer in her navy suit with a leather folder under her arm, and behind her, in a plain dark dress with a carved wooden bird at her throat and her daughter's hand in hers, came Ama Serwaa Boateng, whom they had thrown out the day after the funeral and whom they had not expected to see again. A murmur went round the room. Nana Yaw rose, all soft courtesy. Madam Lawyer, you are welcome. Ama, you did not need to trouble yourself to come. These are family papers. But sit. He gestured to the back, near the door, where the children sat. She will sit at the front, said Afua Asante, because these are her papers. And she set her folder on the table. She did it the way she did everything, a piece at a time, watching their faces. She did not raise her voice once. She took off her glasses, folded them shut with a click, and laid them on the table. And then she opened the folder and took out the first document. I will begin, she said, with the will of the late Kwabena Yaw Mensah, executed in my office on the 14th of March, 2 years ago, in accordance with the Wills Act of 1971, signed by the deceased at the foot of every page and witnessed by 2 persons who take no benefit under it. She held it up so the room could see the signatures, and then she read it aloud, slowly, every clause, in English, and then in Twi, so that the old ones at the back would miss nothing. The house to Ama and Akua, the business to Ama and Akua, the lifelong care of Auntie Grace, from the proceeds, Afua Asante named executor. The fan turned. No one moved. Auntie Grace's hand had gone to her mouth. Nana Yaw stood up halfway through. This paper? Anyone can write a paper, he said, and for the first time in 4 months the softness had cracked, and underneath it was something harder and more frightened. Where was this paper at the funeral? Who are these witnesses? My brother would have told me. I am the elder. He would have told me. Afua Asante did not argue with him. She simply reached into the folder and took out the second document, and she laid it on the table face up so the embossed seal caught the light. This, she said, is a deed of assignment, registered at the Lands Commission of the Republic of Ghana 18 months ago, stamp duty paid, instrument number on the record, transferring the East Legon house into a trust for Ama Boateng and Nana Akua Mensah. Your brother did not leave that house to you in this will, Nana Yaw, because by the time he wrote the will, the house was already no longer his to leave. He had given it to his wife and his child 1.5 years before he died. She turned the deed so he could read the registry stamp. You changed the locks on a house the state of Ghana records as belonging to this woman. I have the search printout here, certified, from the registry itself. The room had gone very quiet. Somewhere, a child's chair scraped and was hushed. And this, said Afua Asante, taking out the third folder, is the incorporation file of Panyan Bakery Limited, a registered company in which the late Kwabena Mensah held 51 shares and Ama Boateng holds 49. His 51 passed to her under the will I have just read, which means that this woman, she nodded toward Ama, who sat straight-backed and silent with her hand closed around the wooden bird, has owned the controlling share of that bakery since the hour her husband died. The business you have been managing these 4 months has never, for one single day, belonged to the Mensah family. She set down a thin sheaf of photocopies, and her voice, for the first time, took on a fine cold edge. I also have the bank statements of the company account. There are withdrawals, a director's allowance paid by Nana Yaw Mensah to Nana Yaw Mensah from a company in which he holds no shares and no office. I am sure, she said very gently, looking at the deacon, the church elder, the man who quoted scripture, that there is an explanation. There will need to be. Nana Yaw sat down. He sat down all at once, his legs deciding for him before his pride could, and he did not get up again. It was Opanyin Kwadwo, the old custodian of custom, who spoke into the silence, and what he said surprised everyone. He set his linguist staff upright between his knees, and he looked at the documents on the table for a long time, and then he looked at Ama, and then he said in Twi, in his dry leaf voice, "When I was a boy, the custom was that a family took the widow in and fed her until she died, and the property and the woman were cared for together as one. That was the custom. Somewhere between my boyhood and now, the people who quote custom kept the part where they take the property." He tapped the staff once on the floor, "and forgot the part where they care for the woman. That is not custom. That is theft wearing custom's cloth." He turned his old eyes on Nana Yaw. "My grandnephew wrote his wishes down because he did not trust us. Read that sentence twice, all of you. He did not trust his own family, and he was right not to." He sat back. The boy has spoken from his grave through the law of the land. We will not shame his memory by fighting it. The house is hers. The shop is hers. The child is hers. And the money that was taken from that account will be returned to the last Pesewa before any of you eats from my pot again. Auntie Grace had not said a word. The mother, who had paused before her daughter-in-law's name for 7 years, sat in the best chair with her hand over her mouth and tears moving down the deep lines of her face. And when at last she spoke, it was not to the lawyer and not to the room. She spoke to Ama. "He left me to your care," she said, her voice breaking on it. "My own son. He trusted you with his old mother and not his own brother. What did we do to him that he could not trust us? What did we do to you?" Ama Serwaa Boateng rose from her chair. She crossed the quiet room to where her husband's mother sat. And she did not gloat, and she did not weep, and she did not say a hard word, because she was the woman she had always been, the one who had sat still through the funeral with her hand around a wooden bird. She knelt down in front of the old woman, and she took Auntie Grace's hand, and she said, "You are still my husband's mother. He asked me to care for you, and I will. There is room in the house. Akua should know her grandmother." She closed Auntie Grace's fingers in both of hers. "Sankofa," she said softly, the old word her husband had carved into wood, the word that means you may go back for what was lost and make it right. We go back and we fetch what is ours. He taught me that. He never said we had to leave anyone behind to do it. The accounting that followed was not soft, and the channel of the law did not bend for anyone's good name. Under Afua Asant's hand, the probate was registered, the locks at East Legon were changed back, and the keys returned to Ama on the steps where she had once stood in mourning cloth. The director's allowance Nana Yaw had drawn, every seedai of it, with a sum added for the months the staff had been paid to keep her out, was repaid under a formal demand because the lawyer made it plain that the alternative was a charge of dishonestly causing loss to a company, and a respectable accountant who is also a church elder cannot survive a police docket with his name on it. He was not jailed. Ama did not ask for that. But the firm in Adabraka heard the story, as firms do, and the church heard it, as churches do, and the soft-spoken elder who had told a widow she was nothing the morning after the funeral spent the next year explaining, over and over, to people who no longer quite met his eye, that it had all been a misunderstanding about custom. The misunderstanding had a registry number. it could be looked up. Ama Serwaa Boateng went back to the bakery on the Spintex Road, and she opened the gate herself with her own hand, and Adwa, the counter girl, came back, and the ovens were lit before dawn the way they had always been. She did not change the name over the door. It still said Panyan, the firstborn, because that had been his pride, and because she had decided that the best revenge a person can take is to make the thing the dead built grow larger than they ever saw it. Within 2 years, there were 3 branches. The little single-room kitchen in Medina, where it had all begun, became the 3rd one, and over its door she hung, in a small glass case beside the menu, the carved wooden Sankofa bird, where the staff could see it and the customers could ask about it, and where she could tell anyone who asked the story of a man who carved a bird with a kitchen knife and quietly, 2 years before he died, made certain that no one could ever take from his wife and his daughter the thing he had built with them. Nana Aqua grew up in the East Legon house that her father had hidden in a truss so that no one could put her on the curb again. She knew her grandmother, who came to live in the back rooms and softened late into the woman she might always have been, and who told the child stories of her father as a boy in Kumasi. And on the night Nana Aqua turned 18, her mother took the small wooden bird out of its glass case at the Medina branch and hung it once more around her own neck, just for the evening, and sat with her daughter on the steps of the house and told her the whole of it, the boat that had turned over twice, the suitcases on the curb, the basins on her head, the gray-haired lawyer at the lorry station, the room in Kumasi where the seal caught the light. He carved this the year we almost lost everything the first time, Ama said, turning the smooth wood in her fingers under the security light, the same warm places shining that she had rubbed smooth on a foam mattress in Medina 17 years before. And he told me, whatever happens, you go back for what is yours. I thought he was talking about a baking contract. She closed her hand around the bird and went still for one breath, the way she always did. He was talking about you and this house and a morning he could not see coming. Sankofa. We went back. We fetched what was ours, and we left no one behind who was willing to be carried. She set the little bird in her daughter's palm and folded the girl's fingers closed over it, exactly the way her husband had once folded hers on a night long ago in a kitchen that smelled of bread. That was tonight's tale from beneath the Baobab. If the truth in it moved you, come sit with us again and tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight.